This is what we call the Phillip Fox billabong. It's only a small billabong. It's about 100 metres long and maybe 20 metres wide with a very flat bottom. And it is absolutely covered now. It doesn't have any water in it. Instead, it's just covered in native vegetation, sedges, persicarias, which are called knotweeds, but they're not weeds. It's just this lush green native expanse of all these, and there's lots of other little species in there. There's probably a dozen different species of wetland plants in there.
Hey humans, welcome back to More Than Human and our series Living with Birrarung. Today, we're doing something a little different and taking the show out of the studio. I'm recording this from the banks of Birrarung Creek, one of the tributaries to Birrarung that I live alongside. My kitchen window looks out to the creek directly, and there's been a little bit of rain, so you can probably hear it flowing in the background. This episode, all of the interviews have been recorded walking alongside Birrarung or one of its tributaries. We're going to focus on how some of the ideas we've been exploring across our first 3 episodes are being put into practice by the communities that live alongside the river. The first voice you heard was one of our guests, Andrew Lees.
I'm Andrew Lees. I'm the president of the Friends of Yarra Flats Park, and our park is situated on the Birrarung in Ivanhoe and Heidelberg, and where we're sitting at the moment is at a billabong called Phillip Fox billabong that we have rehabilitated over the last 5 years in the park.
I visited Phillip Fox billabong with Andrew in early March 2026, and we were joined by Rebecca Penrose from Melbourne Water.
I'm Rebecca Penrose. I represent Melbourne Water, and my role within Melbourne Water is a Waterways and Land Officer in the Lower Birrarung.
The story of the billabong we visited intersects with our broader story in several ways. Its restoration is part of one of the 5 priority projects identified in the Yarra Strategic Plan, Burned Up Birrarung, Burned Up Imaku, which we explored in episode 2. The involvement of the community in its restoration is also a great example of the ideas we explored in episode 3, including what Dr. Michelle Maloney called cultural demand for environmental stewardship. And the restoration of billabongs along Birrarung, including the process of adding water back into urban parklands, is a very tangible example of reconnecting the modern river with its old, remembered paths, and practicing reciprocity with this living, connected entity on our doorstep.
All the joyweed and everything coming up. So different, isn't it? All the persicaria.
This area was just one mass of weeds. There was only less than 30 native species in this area 5 years ago, and probably you had to look pretty hard for a lot of those. Most of it was just covered in weeds, and now you've got to look pretty hard to find a weed, and we've got close to 100 different native species here now.
It's been wonderful to see the surprise species.
Yes.
I think like in between the wet and the dry, and then, you know, with the weed control, just seeing how long some of that seed would have been sitting in the seed bank for.
It's been remarkable that you take away the weeds, you add a bit of water, and suddenly these native species appear from as if nowhere. They've been sitting there, as Rebecca's saying, just waiting for a chance.
I found the walk around this billabong so hopeful. The more time I've spent with this story about a living river, the more complexities and challenges I came across. It's really daunting. But here, I saw evidence that while we're all pulling ourselves together, Birrarung and the surrounding landscape is patiently waiting. When we take the time to turn toward the river, it's ready to respond to that attention.
I think that's one of the wonderful parts about wetlands. They are pretty tough places to live at the best of times, and a lot of the plants can cope with the misuse and the abuse that we've thrown at our wetlands.
The water and the vegetation will always be in charge as to how it's going to react, and then all we have to do is like either get out of its way or give it a helping hand. Yes. And it can be really hard to sort of, I think sometimes it can be people's instinct to want to do, but sometimes with a wetland you have to wait.
I think what also struck me about the conversation with Rebecca and Andrew, one representing a government entity and the other a volunteer community group, was that this project to restore one of Birrarung's billabongs was an opportunity to explore how we work together to achieve the ambition outlined in the Yarra Protection Act and the Strategic Plan. A question has been nagging me since the start of this series. In such a complex and contested space, how do we as humans overcome our own differences to work together for the benefit of a river? This episode is an attempt to answer that question, maybe the question of the historical moment we're living through. How do we work together to solve big challenges? Welcome to episode 4 of Living with Birrarung, Coherence. We are going to return to Andrew, Rebecca and Phillips Fox Billabong, but first, I want to reintroduce someone we met in episode 1 of this series.
My name is Charity Misianyane and I work for Regen Melbourne and I am the lead convener for a swimmable Birrarung.
A swimmable Birrarung. If you live in Melbourne or have ever visited the city, you might be forgiven for thinking that sounds a little far-fetched. I've previously shared in this very series that I have never swum in the river, and for now at least that's partly for a good reason, at least in the lower urban stretches. We've only scratched the surface of the complexity of river governance. The collaborative effort required to restore an urban waterway like Birrarung to a healthy, swimmable state is immense. But, and maybe I've given the game away here, the effort, maybe more than the result, could be the point.
So at Regen Melbourne we have what we call earth shots, and these are wildly ambitious projects where we are looking to be in service to the transformation of our city, of Greater Melbourne. The swimmable Birrarung is basically one of those wildly ambitious projects, and it looks to like how do we collectively work together as the people and institutions, businesses, First Nations, like the science and technological community. How do we come together and actually make the river healthy, thriving, and swimmable again where appropriate? And we chose swimmable Birrarung because, like, it literally flows through the heart of our city. It, I think nearly 2 million people call it home. Nearly 2 million people live within its catchment. 70% of us in Greater Melbourne actually get our drinking water from there. So it's such the Birrarung, the Yarra River is such an integral part of our city's identity, whether or not we recognize it. And it has been so fundamental to the very formation of Melbourne itself. So imagine if the very thing that has given our city life was also alive and thriving.
Wildly ambitious ideas inspire our imagination. They invite us to step outside our usual confines of was and is, to consider potentials of could and should. Take a moment to think. If we wanted to make a river swimmable again, what else would we achieve on the way to reaching that goal? When I met with Charity, we were walking along the Merry Creek. The creek is one of several tributaries to Birrarung with a legacy of colonial modification and management that, for a time at least, relegated it to nothing more than a stormwater drain. As we walked alongside joggers, cyclists, dog walkers and more, the visible scars that remain kept pulling me back to reality. Is it even possible to undo generations of neglect? And why is a swimmable river the goal? Surely there are any number of more important goals that would help restore the river's health. Charity was clear in her belief that we will achieve a swimmable Birrarung. And she's not alone. The City of Melbourne recently signed the Swimmable Cities Charter, joining cities like Paris and Copenhagen in the commitment to healthy, swimmable urban waterways. Charity also went on to address my second question: why this goal? And she referred to some of these overseas examples.
I think that we need to look at all these incredible cities around the world that are showing us the multiple benefits, those that have been thought of and those that are not even thought of, right? Like you look at, I was recently in Paris, and you look at how the swimmable Seine has completely, it's transforming inner city Paris. All of a sudden now, like, you know, you go, okay, like during a heat wave, there's accessible blue-green spaces for everybody. It's for everybody. It's for the public. Public has access to public space. And when before, like because of urbanization, there was no way. Like nobody had access to this space, right? Like you were having to go out wherever you were to find a local pool that was probably had a price to it and stuff like that. But not only that, like I think swimmable urban waterways are activating the public realm. I was surprised that all of a sudden along the river, it's green. People are now coming to sit on the grass, the benches. People are having picnics. There's social cohesion. It's fun. It's alive. New businesses. There were all these beautiful, like Melbourne-esque type cafes and restaurants along the banks of the river where people want to just be sitting by the river, you know, like and I think you think about Copenhagen Harbour, same thing. Like it has completely changed the economy of the city. It has brought biodiversity into the heart of the city. It has unlocked the greening of the city. So like I keep going back to the greening or activating a public realm, because what is happening is that the river always needs the parklands or space, because usually where the river is, there was a floodplain next to it, or, you know. And so you're seeing these things coming back, and you're seeing people saying, I want to be part of this. You're seeing even nature itself wanting to come back into these very once highly restricted and developed areas. And like property prices are going up, new businesses are being unlocked, more people are coming into the city. We know that with climate change impacts, we're going to have alternative solutions, and this is part of it. I think we're not talking about how, like, I go back to that heat wave. I don't know what I would have done, like being stuck in a hot box in a foreign city where I did not have the luxury of like aircon and fans. I know energy intensive, but it completely, like, it just changed it. It changed it.
You can probably hear what a fantastic advocate for the river charity is in that response. In a single answer, she managed to weave in recreational, biodiversity, economic, health, social, cultural, and democratic values. I was particularly taken by the idea that achieving something like a swimmable river is a way to break down the arbitrary walls between us and nature.
Also, it provides an opportunity for people to actually have this real, tangible connection to nature in place that is familiar to them. And then you ask yourself, if I'm in this river, what else is in this river? You know, like I think it unlocks the curiosity, and we start, it unlocks the journey of knowing. We now, I think people start going on the journey of, oh, so this is the river. What was it like before? What is it like now? What happened to it? Are there fish under here? You know, then we start wanting to know more about the role we can play to care for the river, which is really important, right? Like, there's no way, like, I don't think that what we've done to nature, I think if we're not caring for it, I just think that we will lose it. So I think swimmability actually helps us reduce the gap between our livelihoods and what we're used to in these highly urbanized areas, and living in nature and with nature and learning to care for nature, because we need a future where I know it's gone a different way, but I feel like for me the biggest thing is seeing people actually respect, love and care nature. That's the benefit.
As has happened several times during the production of this series, I was initially swept away by Charity's enthusiasm. The whole point of More Than Human is to explore how we can all better understand our relationship with nature and overcome these gaps between the human and the more than human. But I was also a little skeptical. And that skepticism comes back to the core question for this episode. Yes, the journey towards a swimmable Birrarung can achieve great things, but in the complex world of river governance, how do you build an effective coalition capable of steering that ship? As we've seen, consensus is hard to achieve, and there are a lot of contrasting views along the whole length of the river. I put this question to Charity.
I would say that something like a swimmable Birrarung is such an ambitious goal that it cuts through a lot of ideology, it cuts through a lot of constraints, whatever those constraints are, whether it's institutional, whether it's cultural, whether it's environmental, social. It actually does cut across all of that because it's for everybody, it's for all. And so having a vision that actually lots of various people can galvanize around is key, I think. Now, not everybody wants to swim in the river, and that's fine. And I think that through the work, I think I've personally learned that the river is for everybody. It literally is for everybody. Like, the way I say that, I'm not saying it exists for us. I mean that access to it is for everybody. And so everybody needs to find and see themselves by the river or in the river, however that looks like. And so creating space for that is really important. And sometimes, like, I go, oh, I did not think about it. But I think at the end of the day, if there's net gain for the river, if the river is environmentally benefiting, if the river is culturally benefiting, if the river is actually drawing in money to actually do the things that it needs to do to be healthy and thriving, doesn't matter. Does it actually matter that we have different, very polar opposite ideas? If at the end of it, it's getting people to care for the river however they want to.
So, the idea of a swimmable Birrarung is like a big tent, or perhaps a broad canopy, that has a lot of space underneath it for a diversity of opinions and motivations. Maybe the problem is in the framing of the question. When I asked, how do we work together, you could interpret that as, how do we get everyone to agree on everything? But that's not realistic, nor, I'd argue, desirable. Instead, Charity offers an alternative framing. How do we agree on a broad goal and work out the pathway or pathways together? An admission, I owe the title of this episode to what Charity said next, as it stuck with me ever since we spoke.
The last point I would say is I have learned that it's not about consensus at all. It's about coherence. So it's about actually showing people that we actually want the same thing. Like, it's joyful, it's playful, it's about place, it's about the river, it's not about necessarily the individual. However, whatever you're doing that leads us to that, it doesn't matter what the path you take that leads us to that, as long as it leads to a healthy, clean, thriving river. Coherence of all those ideas and pathways and actions and philosophies, I don't really care, as long as at the end of the day there's coherence towards the bigger vision. And it's not a comfortable space to be in, because you learn that you have I've learned I have biases. I have, like, environmental biases, I've got cultural biases. I then learn to actually then create room for those things and take myself. I'm in there, but I have to let go of those things as well.
I really love this idea of coherence and can see the potential of applying it to so many areas where diverse values and perspectives compete to lead the way towards what is ultimately the same goal. In our socially, environmentally, culturally and politically fracturing landscape, coherence offers a pathway forward. But there needs to be a unifying vision that everyone can connect with. So, is there the potential for enough people to connect with the vision of a swimmable Birrarung to make it a reality?
And like, sometimes I ask people, tell me about your connection to the river. And people say, I don't really have a connection to the river. I was like, okay, do you walk to work? Where do you work? I work in the city. Do you walk by the river? Yes. Why do you walk by the river? It's like, really nice and calming. And I'm like, so you do have a relationship or a connection to the river. And then they stop and they go, oh my gosh, yes, I do. And so I think I have had almost like a journey of going from passive, beside, in the background, river, to oh, you're here. You've always been here. And I see you. And that changes. I see you. Like you and me looking at each other now. Like, of course we're going to engage. Of course we're going to talk. We're going to want to know about each other.
There is a challenge here, especially for those of us, myself included, who work in the weeds of environmental or sustainable movements and share a particular worldview about our relationship with nature and place. It's a challenge to be open, to avoid gatekeeping, because the only way through is together.
When you talk to people who've been involved in making the Parramatta River swimmable, and you hear about how, they have created pathways to the river to allow for the multicultural communities that live within that catchment, because not everybody wants to strip down to their togs and leap into the river, and people have some people just want to rock up and put their toes in, their hands in, or have a lovely family picnic by the river. So I think that there needs to be, we don't all have the same associations or cultural connections or histories with water bodies. They're different, and we need to accommodate that difference.
Birrarung Birrarung Umaku, the Wurundjeri name for the Yarra Strategic Plan, means what is good for Birrarung is good for all. What I hear Charity saying here is that we need to mean it when we say all. We'll be back after the break, where we'll explore how Coherence is working in a different context, the restoration of Birrarung's billabongs.
So it's discussion of weeds, half of this.
I kind of expect that when you come to a planting thing. You do one planting day and then you do weed maintenance once a month for the rest of your life is kind of the thing. Yeah. Welcome back to Living with Birrarung. We're back at Phillips Fox Billabong with Andrew Leeds, President of the Friends of Yarra Flats Park, and Rebecca Penrose, Melbourne Waters, Waterways and Land Officer for the Lower Birrarung. We're talking about a common theme for those involved in restoration work. Weeds.
And that's what I think Andrew and the others here have sort of cracked the code on. And I think that that's another beautiful part of something that community groups have, I guess, the flexibility or ability to do, which is something that as agencies we can work with to support, because it's probably one of our constraints, is the 4 weekly follow-up, that consistent, detailed, high-intensity follow-up to get the best possible outcome from revegetation is that weed control component. And I think what we're looking at here with Phillips Fox and its surrounds and the revegetation leading to its connection with Birrarung is it's been done incredibly well.
It's interesting because when we started this, I was told that it takes 3 years to get rid of the weeds, and I thought, rubbish, we can do that just in 1 year. What are you talking about? Anyway, 3 years later, yes, they're very correct.
one year to get rid of the ones you can see,
yes,
1 year to get rid of the ones that show up,
and
then a year to let the dropped seeds.
Yeah, the stubborn ones to come up. It is a long process.
Andrew and Rebecca have hit on 2 things here that are at the core of what makes restoration initiatives so challenging. The first is knowledge, or rather, a lack of knowledge. Our understanding of the natural world is constantly growing, but we are collectively realising how little we truly understand about ecosystem functions and their responses to disturbance and intervention. Don't get me wrong, we've learned a lot, especially in recent decades, thanks to the diligent work of dedicated scientists, practitioners, and communities. But what we do know has often been learned through significant trial and error. Saying that, In Australia, we do have one significant advantage, which Andrew pointed out during our chat.
I come from a scientific background, so I guess I always like to look at the science of things, and when you look at the natural environment, the science is a bit thin on the ground at times. And then you go off and you talk to Indigenous people and you discover that they've worked this all out long ago. And the science is in many ways trying to catch up and obviously add to it and look at different things, whys and all those sort of deep and meaningful questions that scientists like to ask. So I don't think in actual fact that there's really a conflict between Wurundjeri or Indigenous ways of dealing with land and I guess our more Western scientific approach. I think they do actually work in very nicely together, but it's not a simple process to do that.
Rebecca also noted how much her work is guided by traditional owners and the knowledge they hold, and highlighted the need to support capacity building for traditional owner groups so that they can provide leadership and determine how their knowledge is applied.
I guess specifically in terms of the work that I get to be involved in, having the ability to work with and learn from traditional owners is a huge guiding factor in the way that I approach my work. It's been a genuine privilege to learn the history of some of the spaces that I get to work through directly from traditional owners. And I guess the most important part now for me in my role moving forward is making sure that the work that I do honours those practices, but it also the way that we go about doing the work into the future builds capacities for traditional owners and pathways for traditional owners to be able to undertake that work themselves more into the future and be guiding the way other groups are making decisions into the future. So it's absolutely vital to how I undertake my work.
So here is another practical example of why Indigenous knowledge is crucial to our collective success. As has been said throughout this series, Indigenous peoples have had a lot longer to develop an understanding of country via their own scientific trial and error process. We're not starting from square one. The second challenge Andrew and Rebecca touched on is resourcing. Specifically, the time, money, and people to undertake the restoration work itself, including the monthly manual weeding that can make a difference between long-term success and failure in an intervention.
One of the great benefits, if not the greatest benefit of having community involvement in a place like this is that we provide free labour. And it is so expensive for a government department to do the sort of work we do because it is just very labour intensive. So we can restore an area like this probably at about a quarter of the cost to the government that they would have to fork out if they were doing it without basically free labour.
It's a not-so-hidden reality of how our society at large functions. Essential services and beautiful spaces are expensive to maintain, and government spending almost always falls short of what is required in every sphere. A literal army of volunteers fills those gaps. Volunteering Australia data from 2023 showed that 36% of Australians formally volunteered, that is, through a group or organisation. That's over a third of Australians volunteering over a 12-month period. Bringing that back to our questions about working together with Birrarung, who are the people who volunteer to care for the river? Where do they come from and why are they willing to spend hours each month pulling out weeds?
Our group are largely local people who use the park for recreation, and they have a passion for the natural environment and they select themselves. We don't particularly go out and say we want you and you. They just decide they know about what we're doing in the park and they decide they want to help. I think that the community around here that we're interested in are the people that use the park. I think that Australians do have a culture of volunteering and helping their community. I think that's something that has always been in Australia, so I think there's that underlying a lot of people's interest in doing something in the park, and also it's a social activity. People get together and they often have similar interests, so they have that social connection also, which I think is really important and probably one of the fundamental principles of our organisation. I think it's also empowering people, that they feel that this is their local park, and the fact that they can come down here and do something in their local park to improve it is something that gives them a bit of pride that they actually are doing something for their local area.
The variety of reasons that Andrew outlines here echoes some of Charity's sentiments from earlier in this episode. Some may be motivated to get involved because they care deeply about the river itself. For others, there's a social element or a sense of pride for their local area. Whatever their individual reasons, these people still come together to collectively and regularly care for their local patch. Andrew also pointed out another benefit to working as a group, which builds on the earlier points about government resourcing.
I think people also like the idea of advocating for their particular area, and they find governments all a bit too daunting. But if you're part of a group who are putting in some sort of submission or talking to a government agency, they feel as though they're getting listened to by governments. So that's, I think, an important issue as well. One of the things that is really important is that governments often have lots of different priorities, and particularly in conservation, they're more worried about looking after Wilson's Promontory or some special place, a rare plant or an endangered species. And a park along the Yarra here, like Yarra Flats Park, has none of those sort of imperatives for a government. But for the local people, it's really important to them. So if they get stuck into doing something in the local park, then that, I think, is critical to actually how we're going to improve the Birrarung, because most of the Birrarung is in the same situation as this park. It's not a high priority for a lot of government conservation work, even though when you look at it, it should be, but that's just resources and lack thereof.
I put these same questions to Rebecca. Her work brings her into contact with community groups along a significant stretch of the river, so I was curious to know whether she had more to say from a broader perspective. She began by describing the breadth of the groups she encounters.
So in my role at Melbourne Water, I work with a lot of community, either organised groups, individuals, and they're completely vital to the work that we do, particularly the work that I do in caring for the Birrarung. I meet community groups from all over the catchment that all have their own unique connection to the river and their own lens about how they care for the river. And community groups do that in a variety of ways. A lot of them are similar to the work that Andrew and the Friends group do here, where it's delivery of on-ground care for country like weed control and revegetation works. It's citizen science works, whether that be fauna monitoring to help guide future works in the area, or whether that be water monitoring programs as well. It's also really important they undertake a lot of advocacy. So with the Birrarung being that living entity, a lot of that was driven, and promoted and continues to be promoted by community. So they also hold a great deal of knowledge. A lot of the knowledge, some people have been caring for these spaces for 30 plus years, and that sort of knowledge and being shared from community member to community member is really invaluable.
In terms of why people get involved in these groups, Rebecca offered some additional thoughts that acknowledged another important characteristic of our city. Melbourne is incredibly culturally diverse and home to many migrants who have decided to make the city their home.
I'd have to agree with what Andrew said. Again, I have a great privilege of meeting many, many people in my role, and I do find the ways that people connect to the river and to landscapes can be so broad, well beyond the necessarily environmental lens. Sometimes it's a recreational lens. They like to ride, or they like to paddle, or they like to swim, or they like to hike. this landscape provides them a way to undertake the recreation that they enjoy. I also get to meet people who maybe are new to living in an area or even new to living in the country, and English might be a second language, and coming in and building their new community and learning about the place that they now call home has been something that I'm really pleased to see has been a huge driver and really welcomed in volunteering lately.
This nicely reflects Charity's earlier comments about the need to welcome diversity, acknowledging that the river is for everybody. Rebecca also took this idea a step further by suggesting a diversity of ways that people can volunteer, acknowledging we all move through the world differently and might not have the same time or ability to contribute in the same way.
Not everybody has the luxury of access in our day and age, and sometimes it can be as simple as doing something online to support a community group. Some community groups might need some help with their newsletters or promoting things through iNaturalist, sharing data, uploading data, analysing data that's collected online, advocating either at a local level or a state or a federal level. Those actions all come together, whether they be on ground or not, to care for the river.
So, if you were listening to this episode and thinking that all the talk of weeding was a bit much, rest assured, there are numerous other ways you could get involved and leverage your own skills or time. There are so many benefits to getting involved in your community.
I mean, the benefits of community involvement, I think we would all appreciate flow on so much more than just at an individual level. So I think communities that are more engaged with where they live and more engaged with each other are healthier communities, both physically and mentally. I think that creates a lot of resilience and allows people to feel a lot more connected, which is a lot harder to do. It allows people to feel that them at an individual level, at a local patch level, at a singular reserve in urbanised Melbourne, are part of a greater good, that their contribution plus the other friends group down the river from them or the other local group that's invested in their space, collectively, they are part of a greater good. They are part of a movement of people that are caring for spaces. And I think it removes that, at least to some extent, those feelings of isolation and that problems are too big to be solved.
In the words of the Yarra Strategic Plan, bend up Birrarung, bend up Umaku. What is good for Birrarung is good for all. The problems facing the river are big. It is going to take a lot of ongoing work, collectively by many groups along the whole length of the river, to care for Birrarung. Andrew was honest about this fact.
There's a few challenges that keep me awake at night. One is just the size of the problem. I mean, we've toiled away for 5 years at this 2 hectare Phillip Fox billabong, but there's 50 hectares of other bushland in this park that also need work, and at our current rate it's just not going to happen, obviously. But there's gems like the billabongs which just need that time and effort. So there's perhaps better ways, but I think there's still going to be that cold, hard reality of it's going to take an awful lot of work.
There is a role we can all play, and in doing so, we'll be helping build communities of care that will serve us well in the years to come. I'm not just hypothesising here either. There is recent evidence that the work of Friends of Yarra Flats Park, Melbourne Water and other community groups and entities has paid off for the wider community, especially when we were confined to our local areas.
I think the community loves it. I think it's fantastic. And when Melbourne Water pumped water into one of the other billabongs in the park here, the annulus, people were just delighted with all the wildlife and the ducks and all the water birds and the frogs. It was just a real highlight through COVID.
It really was. Seeing annulus full completely changes obviously the visual of the landscape. Having the size of that billabong, full to the brim with water, and then watching it go through that cycle to drying again, it's such a fascinating process to be able to watch.
And as we walk through this forest, you could just imagine you're nowhere near a suburban environment, but we're less than 10 kilometres from the centre of Melbourne, and it just is such an oasis, green oasis, pretty much in the middle of Melbourne.
Yeah, I mean, there's not many places or opportunities to see swamp wallabies and, you know, mobs of roos moving through within this proximity to the CBD, and that is a real treasure here. I think we see them most times.
I want to return now to our central question for this episode. The conversation with Rebecca and Andrew was so comfortable, I had to keep reminding myself that they represented two different organisations. I asked them for their thoughts on what makes for a successful working relationship between government entities and the community.
There are a lot of engaged communities along the Birrarung. I think the reasons why people engage can be very different from the urbanised sections up and through the middle catchments and then up into the, you know, towards the source and the headwaters. So I think one of the key parts that we can all play, whether it be ourselves as an agency or other community to community, is accepting people where they are in terms of them wanting to connect with the river and connect with their community. And I think that is one of the key drivers and one of the key ways that we can get people more involved, because I do witness sometimes that can actually be a barrier if somebody is feeling that they have to participate in a certain way to care for their community, that it will actually stop them from becoming engaged. Whereas I think it's a collective, if we are able to accept people for where they are at and then build them up from there, that's a much better way to accept all people to become and get involved.
It's complex, and I think that this is one of the issues, that community groups do have different roles when it comes to interacting with government and other entities. We have an advocacy role where we are in many ways trying to criticise government or say you should be doing this and not that. Then there is a role of working with government to actually get things done. And I think one of the critical parts of that, which perhaps needs a bit more work, is actually working out common goals and common ways of actually implementing what we want to do to get those goals. And I think that's one of the issues that we need to look at, is actually a lot more discussion about where we're going, and different groups are going to have different goals, and it has to be worked out, I think, on a very case-by-case, site-by-site basis, so that we've got a clear joint approach to what we want to do, and then it works quite well. And I don't think it can be done by set processes. I think it's really a matter of just sitting down and discussing with the government agencies about what we're both wanting to do, what the problems are, a bit of give and take, and working out the best way of getting there.
Yeah, I mean, I think Andrew's completely correct in that it is complex, particularly when you're talking interagency. Water authorities have different responsibilities to land authorities, and we all have all our obligations that we have to meet. But there is also a lot of overlap with those as well. And I think in my experience, in my role, the best ways forward is when we go forward together and we actually lean on each other's strengths and we're able to support each other in their weaknesses. So when it comes to delivering care for country, care for Birrarung, the most successful way forward, I feel, is if we all move forward together. And that does mean having space to accept that we're all flawed in some way, but we have a common goal. And a common goal is an improved health for the river and for the people that live along it. So I think with that common goal in mind, moving forward is a lot easier. And working with community. So we're as much a part of the community as an individual or a friends group like Andrew and others. We're all community members ourselves. So I don't feel that it's any different, but we offer different skill sets and we offer different capabilities. And the intimacy of land care that can be given by a community group for their patch is going to be different to what an agency can provide at a landscape scale approach. And I think both are needed. And when they work together, you get amazing results.
I can see that concept of coherence emerging in these answers. They both speak to the need for common goals. I also appreciated that both Andrew and Rebecca acknowledged that disagreement was inevitable and an essential part of the process.
Personally, I think, some of the best working relationships I have built over my time have come with people that I don't necessarily agree with on the first meeting. But you give each other grace and you give each other space to talk through and understand each other's perspectives. And you actually find usually at the end of it that you have a shared common goal at the end. And by doing that, you actually learn about what each other can do and you actually learn how to support each other. So I don't think you have to agree necessarily with everyone, but you have to be willing to take the space and the time to learn how to work together.
I think it's also an issue of trust. And if we don't trust a government agency or a government agency doesn't trust us, then we've got problems. But if we know exactly where we're coming from, what our goals are and what our foibles are, as Rebecca says, then we can work out, I guess, a good framework where trust can actually be established and they can trust us to come down here and do the job. And I think we've got to that point now that both Melbourne Water and Parks Victoria know what we do, how we do it. They're happy with that, so they say just get on and do the job.
So again, it's not about reaching agreement on everything, but trust is essential. I want to acknowledge that this is easier said than done. However, in the production of this series, I've seen remarkable examples of these networks of trust and collaboration emerging between communities, government entities, traditional owners, businesses, researchers, politicians, and lifelong advocates. We all follow our own tributary to meet the river and mingle our voices, hopes, and skills in service to it. I also spoke with Rebecca and Andrew about the central theme for this series, the river as a living entity, and how this influences the work they're doing together. I want to present what followed with minimal commentary, as it was a beautiful moment where I was able to step back and let their conversation flow.
Personally, am witnessing in real time, which is a really lovely thing, people understanding that waterways are living entities. And I'm getting to witness that connection and you can almost see the moment where it drops, where I am standing next to a living, breathing ecosystem that supports all these other organisms within that. And I also, being here, am a part of that. So I think that that's a really beautiful thing to see. I definitely see that the messaging in the community more broadly is becoming more deeply understood and more accepted, rather than it being this far-fetched concept. And I think a lot of that is community to community education, understanding that concept, and therefore the behaviour change almost comes along with that. And that can be decision making at like a local government level. It might be decision making at an individual level about how they may behave next to the river or engaging with the river, knowing that it is a living, breathing system. It's definitely, I think, made people more aware that we need to do more than just look at the channel, that we actually need to look at the floodplain, because that is a part of the living system. So it's been a really beautiful thing to witness. I see that the living entity conversation is happening now for other waterways, which is also a really lovely thing to be able to witness and be a part of. And I think in a short amount of time, it's gone from this vague idealistic concept to something that people are truly embodying and then for changing their behaviours, which is lovely.
Can I ask Rebecca a question? What do you think is responsible for that? What are the factors that you think are working to actually improve people's understanding of the complexity of it all?
I think there's so many factors at play. I think one of it is, I guess, without going too deep, the broader scale of our planet's health at the moment and the concerns more broadly. I think another factor at play is, although they were terrible times, I think COVID made people slow down and connect to where they live and spend more time walking around outside. And I think that changed the way people saw their environment. I really do. A lot of people with very busy lives, might work at a job that isn't outdoors, actually had that time to go and witness the birds that live in their local neighbourhood, for instance, or the trees in their local neighbourhood. And it definitely, from conversations I've had, shifted a lot of people's perspective. And I think from that, people became curious. And I think by people becoming curious, really led them to exploring and learning and having different conversations that they may not have had otherwise.
That's very gratifying, because that's one of the basic aims I have, is that if I make this park interesting environmentally for people, that they will get engaged with nature, and that will then lead to a better understanding of what's going on and a more concerned approach to looking after our natural world. And I guess I sometimes say that this park is basically just a PR exercise for nature.
I think the change that I've seen in the 2 years that I've been coming to this park and working alongside you, the events that we've done, the walks and talks and things here, the way people comment about what this space used to look like for them versus how it looks like for them now from the work that you and the group have been doing is exceptional. So you're definitely lifting the profile of the park, and you're definitely a huge part in people creating that connection, because they hear frogs here now. They hear frogs here now, they see different birds now, and I do genuinely believe like a lot of that community wouldn't happen without yourself and the group here in this park.
That's great. Good feedback. We'll keep going. Yes, we'll keep beavering away.
I could just sit down and just let you guys go. I want to finish this episode with a reflection that brings together a lot of the concepts we've covered.
So we are going to make mistakes, and we are going to have things that fail. And I think that's a critical part of it all. And perhaps that's where governments get a little bit toey when they're spending taxpayers' money on restoration work that may not work. And that's something that community groups, it's just their time. Okay, yeah, I've put a few hours in here and it didn't work, big deal. Community groups have a little bit more tolerance perhaps for failure and things that trial and error have proved doesn't work.
I think some of the biggest challenges now and into the future when it comes to the Birrarung is the fact that we're living in a time where cities and suburbs and the like are going to be expanding. And we all know, because of where we live and how we live now, that puts a lot of pressure on our natural environment. And no isn't going to be an option, I think, for a lot of these things as well. So the question then, and the opportunity then, is how do we support what people need and what the river needs in the best possible way that we can? And I think that in itself opens the door for like innovative thinking. That opens the door for us to pause and think about, this is how we've always done it, but what could we do and how could we plan things differently so that we get a different outcome into the future? And that outcome is a improved, healthy, loved Birrarung. So they're big. I won't sugarcoat it and say that they're small challenges. They are big challenges, but I do genuinely believe that with big challenges come big reward.
In this episode, you heard Andrew Lees, President of the Friends of Yarra Flats Park, Rebecca Penrose, Waterways and Land Officer with Melbourne Water, and Charity Mosignane, Lead Convener of the swimmable Birrarung Earthshot at Region Melbourne. You can find out more about our guests and the information discussed in this episode in our show notes, or head to morethanhumanpod.net and click Dive Deeper. More Than Human is an independent production from me, Tim McIntosh Hanna, and Mark Spencer from Here Media. This is our 4th episode in our series about Birrarung, and we've got a few more planned. If you'd like to support our work, please leave us a review and rate the show wherever you listen to podcasts. It really does help us reach new people. And speaking of new people, share this series with your friends, family and colleagues. And one more shout out. You can leave us a voicemail by clicking the little blue microphone on our website, morethanhumanpod.net. We'd really love to hear how you are connecting with your local waterways. Are you volunteering, or do you just walk by it whenever you can? Who knows, we might even have the opportunity to share some of these stories in the show. We'll be back next month with episode 5 of Living with Birrarung.
But, I mean, you look at that and it's so different. It's beautiful.
Just amazing, and it is beyond my wildest dreams.
Yeah.
What has actually eventuated out of all this work we've put in.
Remember one of the first meetings and we were looking at it and it was still obviously not quite what it is today, and you said, I don't know if we'll ever get there.
Yes.
I think you got there.
I think we have.
I think you have.
Blows me away every time I come down here, to be honest.
Stunning. It's absolutely stunning. I can't imagine what it's going to sound like when there's water back again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Next
know.
wet cycle. It's going to
Yeah.
sound
Hope I'm still alive when that happens next time.
Mm.